Ferrari's 2019 Formula One car was impossible. Not fast, not dominant. Impossible. They were pulling straight-line speeds that made Mercedes engineers check their own data twice, convinced their timing screens had glitched. But here's the brutal truth about the biggest scandal F1 never solved. How do you police a crime when checking for it might destroy the evidence? The FIA spent months investigating Ferrari's power unit, issued technical directive after technical directive, and then in February 2020, they announced a secret settlement. No admission of guilt, no public penalty, just a confidential handshake that made the entire controversy disappear. That's not justice. That's institutional failure wearing a business suit. Let's start with what everyone could see. Ferrari's straight-line speed in the second half of 2019 wasn't just good. It was physics-defying. At Spa, Charles Leclerc was hitting speeds on the Kemmel Straight that left Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes looking like it was towing a caravan. We're talking about gaps of 8 to 10 kilometers per hour on the straights. In Formula One, where teams spend millions to find 0.2 of a second per lap, Ferrari had found entire seconds. The numbers tell the story. Before the summer break, Ferrari was competitive, but not dominant. After the break, they suddenly had this rocket ship that could blast past anyone on any straight. Leclerc won at Spa and Monza not through racecraft or strategy, but through pure, inexplicable speed that rival teams couldn't match. Here's where it gets interesting. F1 engines have fuel flow limits. Think of it like a speed limit for how much fuel can enter the engine per second. The rule exists to control power output and keep costs manageable. Every team gets the same fuel allocation, and there's a mandatory sensor that monitors how much fuel flows through the system. But what if you could trick that sensor? What if you found a way to inject extra fuel when the sensor wasn't looking or couldn't detect it properly? That's exactly what rival teams suspected Ferrari was doing. The theory was elegant and devious. Use some kind of accumulator system or sensor manipulation to pulse extra fuel into the engine during acceleration phases, then dial it back when the monitoring system was paying attention. It's like having a speed camera detector for your fuel system. Mercedes and Red Bull weren't just suspicious, they were furious. Christian Horner was making pointed comments in press conferences. Mercedes engineers were filing formal complaints. These aren't teams that cry foul lightly. When they start demanding investigations, they've usually done their homework. The smoking gun came in the form of Ferrari's reaction to technical directives. The FIA doesn't issue technical directives for fun. They're surgical strikes designed to close specific loopholes. Throughout 2019, every time the FIA issued a new technical directive about fuel systems or sensor monitoring, Ferrari's performance would mysteriously drop for a few races. Technical Directive 35 in September targeted fuel flow monitoring systems. Ferrari's speed advantage vanished at Singapore. Technical Directive 37 in October addressed sensor circumvention methods. Ferrari struggled in Japan and Mexico. It was like watching someone's poker face crack every time the house changed the rules. But here's the genius of Ferrari's alleged system. It was too sophisticated for the FIA's detection methods. The mandatory fuel flow sensor was designed to catch crude violations, not elaborate engineering workarounds. It's like using a metal detector to catch someone who's learned to make plastic weapons. Austin 2019 was when everything exploded. Red Bull formally protested Ferrari's power unit legality. Not a casual complaint, but a full legal challenge demanding the FIA tear apart Ferrari's engine and examine every component. The protest failed on procedural grounds, but the message was clear. Rival teams were convinced Ferrari was cheating, and they wanted proof. Ferrari's response? They kept winning. Leclerc took pole position in Austin despite the protest hanging over them. It was either supreme confidence or supreme arrogance, depending on your perspective. The performance gap was so obvious that even casual fans started asking questions. When a Ferrari could draft past a Mercedes on a straight despite starting the maneuver from a disadvantageous position, something was fundamentally wrong with the competitive balance. By the end of 2019, Ferrari had secured their first Constructors' Championship challenge in years, not through better aerodynamics or superior strategy, but through straight-line speed that defied explanation. They'd found something their rivals couldn't match, couldn't understand, and apparently couldn't prove was illegal. That's when the real investigation began. So the FIA launched their investigation and immediately ran face first into the fundamental problem with policing modern Formula One. The technology had outpaced their ability to regulate it. The fuel flow sensor that every team was required to use wasn't some cutting-edge piece of kit. It was a standardized component supplied by a third-party manufacturer, designed to catch basic fuel flow violations. Think of it like a home security system from 2010 trying to detect a cyber attack from 2019. Ferrari's alleged system was reportedly so sophisticated that it could manipulate fuel delivery in ways the sensor simply couldn't detect. We're talking about potential accumulator systems that could store fuel pressure and release it in controlled bursts, or electronic manipulation that could fool the sensor's timing mechanisms during specific engine cycles. The brutal truth is this: The FIA was trying to catch a team that had potentially spent millions developing sensor circumvention technology, using a sensor that cost a few $1,000s and was never designed for that level of scrutiny. Here's where the cat and mouse game began. Throughout the second half of 2019, the FIA started issuing technical directives like they were playing whack-a-mole. Each directive was essentially the FIA saying, "We think you might be doing this specific thing, so now it's explicitly illegal." Technical Directive 35 in September focused on fuel flow monitoring and sensor integrity. Ferrari's pace immediately dropped at Singapore. They went from untouchable on straights to merely competitive. Leclerc finished third instead of winning from pole position. 2 weeks later at Russia, Ferrari had seemingly found a workaround. The rocket ship was back. Leclerc won from pole, gapping the field on every straight like the technical directive had never happened. So the FIA issued Technical Directive 37 in October, specifically targeting methods of circumventing fuel flow sensors through electronic means. Again, Ferrari's performance dropped. They struggled in Japan and Mexico, looking more like a normal Formula One team than the speed demons they'd been. But here's the thing that made rival teams absolutely livid. Ferrari kept adapting. Each technical directive would hurt them temporarily. Then they'd find another angle, another loophole, another way to extract performance that shouldn't have existed. Red Bull and Mercedes weren't just filing complaints anymore. They were demanding full engine teardowns. Christian Horner was practically begging the FIA to physically dismantle Ferrari's power unit and examine every component under a microscope. The problem? You can't just tear apart a Formula One power unit mid-season. These engines are worth millions of dollars and take months to build. Dismantling one for inspection would essentially end Ferrari's championship campaign. The FIA was stuck between proving potential cheating and destroying a team's entire season based on suspicion. Meanwhile, Ferrari was playing the perfect political game. They never admitted wrongdoing. They never explained their speed advantage. They just kept showing up to races, following whatever new technical directive had been issued, and finding ways to stay competitive. The Austin protest in October was the climax of this regulatory nightmare. Red Bull formally challenged Ferrari's power unit legality, demanding immediate technical scrutiny. The protest failed because Red Bull couldn't provide specific enough evidence of what Ferrari was allegedly doing wrong. You can't protest something if you can't explain exactly what law is being broken. Red Bull knew Ferrari was gaining an illegal advantage, but they couldn't prove the specific method. The FIA found themselves in an impossible position. They had mounting evidence that Ferrari's power unit was operating outside the spirit of the regulations, but they couldn't definitively prove it was breaking the letter of the law. Their detection methods were inadequate, their technical directives were being circumvented, and a full engine teardown would create a political crisis. By the end of 2019, the investigation had become a bureaucratic stalemate. The FIA couldn't prove Ferrari was cheating, but they also couldn't explain Ferrari's performance advantage through legal means. Rival teams were threatening legal action if the matter wasn't resolved. That left the FIA facing two equally unpalatable options: admit their regulatory system was fundamentally broken, or find a way to make the entire problem disappear without admitting fault on either side. They chose the cover-up. February 28, 2020, the FIA drops a statement that's a masterclass in saying absolutely nothing while pretending to resolve everything. They announced they've reached a confidential settlement with Ferrari following their investigation into the 2019 power unit. Let me translate that corporate speak for you. We couldn't prove they were cheating, but we also can't explain how they were legal, so we're all going to pretend this never happened. The settlement statement was 3 paragraphs of pure bureaucratic poetry. The FIA said they'd concluded their investigation. Ferrari said they were satisfied with the outcome. Neither side admitted any wrongdoing. The terms of the agreement would remain confidential to protect both parties' interests. It's the regulatory equivalent of a plea bargain where nobody pleads guilty and the judge seals the court records. Justice served, case closed, nothing to see here. But here's what that settlement actually meant in plain language. Ferrari agreed to stop whatever they were doing in exchange for the FIA agreeing to never publicly admit what Ferrari had been doing was illegal. Both sides got to save face while competitive integrity got thrown under the bus. The proof came immediately. Ferrari's 2020 season was a catastrophe. The team that had been untouchable on straights in 2019 suddenly couldn't overtake a Williams on the main straight at Monza. Their own home race, Sebastian Vettel went from fighting for wins to fighting for points. Charles Leclerc went from pole position hero to midfield mediocrity. You don't go from rocket ship to road car overnight unless something fundamental changed in your power unit. And the only thing that changed was Ferrari's secret agreement with the FIA. Compare this to every other major cheating scandal in F1 history. When McLaren got caught with Ferrari's technical documents in 2007, they were publicly disqualified from the Constructors' Championship and fined $100 million. When Renault was caught ordering Nelson Piquet Jr. to crash deliberately in Singapore 2008, there were public hearings, public penalties, and public accountability. But Ferrari's alleged fuel flow manipulation, secret handshake, confidential terms, case dismissed, no public admission of guilt, no public penalty, no transparency whatsoever. The other teams went ballistic. Mercedes, Red Bull, and McLaren issued a joint statement expressing their surprise and shock at the confidential nature of the settlement. They demanded full disclosure of the investigation's findings and the settlement terms. The FIA's response? Tough luck. The matter was closed and would remain confidential. It's like the referee in a football match making a controversial call, then refusing to explain the decision to players, coaches, or fans. This set the worst possible precedent for F1's regulatory future. The message was clear. If you're sophisticated enough in your rule-breaking and politically important enough as a team, you can negotiate your way out of public accountability. Ferrari isn't just any team. They're F1's oldest competitor, its most iconic brand, and they hold special veto powers over rule changes. They generate massive television audiences and sponsor revenue. Publicly destroying Ferrari's reputation with a cheating scandal would have cost F1 millions in lost revenue and damaged the sport's credibility. So instead of transparency, we got political convenience. Instead of justice, we got a backroom deal that protected everyone's financial interests while sacrificing competitive integrity. The settlement also included Ferrari helping the FIA develop new fuel flow monitoring systems for future seasons. Think about that for a moment. The team that allegedly circumvented the old monitoring system was now helping design the new one. It's like asking a bank robber to upgrade your security system. This wasn't justice disguised as a cover-up. This was a cover-up disguised as justice. The FIA took a potential cheating scandal that could have destroyed F1's credibility and turned it into a confidential business transaction that protected everyone except the fans who deserved to know the truth. The brutal reality is this: Ferrari's 2019 power unit was either completely legal and the other teams were wrong, or it was illegal and the FIA allowed them to escape without public accountability. Either way, the confidential settlement ensured we'd never know which version of events was true. That's not how justice works. That's how politics works. But the settlement wasn't just about making Ferrari's alleged cheating disappear. It was about rewriting the entire regulatory framework to prevent anyone from pulling the same stunt again. Part of Ferrari's confidential agreement included helping the FIA develop new fuel flow monitoring systems for the 2020 season and beyond. Let me explain why this was the worst possible outcome for competitive integrity. Ferrari had allegedly spent millions developing technology to circumvent the existing fuel flow sensor. They'd found every weakness, every blind spot, every potential workaround in the system. Now the FIA was asking them to help design the replacement system. The new monitoring systems implemented for 2020 were significantly more sophisticated. Multiple sensors, real-time telemetry, cross-verification protocols. The FIA essentially admitted their previous system was inadequate by completely overhauling it. But here's the genius of Ferrari's position. They helped write the new rules while knowing exactly what they'd been doing wrong under the old rules. They could ensure the new regulations closed the loopholes they'd been exploiting while potentially opening new ones they could exploit in the future. Meanwhile, Mercedes and Red Bull were left trying to understand regulations that had been partially written by their biggest rival. The regulatory changes went beyond just fuel flow monitoring. The FIA introduced new restrictions on energy recovery systems, tighter controls on power unit software, and enhanced scrutineering procedures. Each change was a tacit admission that the previous system had been vulnerable to sophisticated manipulation. Ferrari's 2020 performance collapse proved how significant their alleged advantage had been. They went from winning races to struggling for points overnight. Sebastian Vettel, who'd been fighting for championships in 2019, was suddenly getting lapped by cars he'd been racing wheel-to-wheel with months earlier. But the most damaging aspect of this entire process was what it revealed about F1's power structure. Technical regulations aren't just about fairness and competition. They're about politics, money, and protecting the sport's most valuable assets. Ferrari's special status in Formula One isn't just historical. They receive unique payments from commercial rights holders, they have veto power over rule changes, and they generate massive television audiences worldwide. Publicly destroying Ferrari's reputation with a cheating scandal would have cost everyone money. So instead of transparency and accountability, we got a backroom deal that protected Ferrari's brand, saved the FIA's face, and left every other team wondering what they'd missed and how they could find similar advantages. This pattern repeats throughout F1's history. When powerful teams or manufacturers are caught bending rules, the resolution often happens behind closed doors. When smaller teams make similar mistakes, they face public penalties and media scrutiny. The Ferrari settlement established a dangerous precedent. Sophisticated rule-breaking by politically important teams can be resolved through confidential agreements rather than public accountability. It's regulatory capture disguised as conflict resolution. The brutal truth is Ferrari's 2019 power unit scandal revealed everything wrong with F1's power structure. Technical innovation became political negotiation. Justice became a confidential business transaction. We'll never know if Ferrari was actually cheating because the system was designed to protect institutional interests over competitive integrity. The FIA chose political convenience over transparency, and every fan lost. What do you think? Was this justice or just another F1 cover-up? Drop your thoughts below and subscribe for more takes that cut through the PR fog.